Hello, everybody, and welcome to Heartlight Vedic Astrology. In today's talk, I was going to discuss the planetary transits or Gochara that are going on in November 2025. This talk is from a Vedic astrologer Jyotish perspective, so ancient Indian astrology that's more than 5,000 years old. And it seems like the theme for this month is deep metamorphosis. So let's take a look. Note beforehand, the information presented here is for educational purposes only and should not be considered medical, financial, professional, or life advice of any kind. If you are in need, please contact an appropriate professional for support. And you might take a minute or two to read the rest of this disclaimer. So some announcements and orientation, especially for those who are new to the channel. So I'm offering a level 1 Vedic astrology course in January coming up, 2026. I posted a little video on it to answer some of your questions. If that's something that you feel drawn to, you can email heartlightastro@yahoo.com for an application. And application deadlines are just around the corner, November 14th, so keep that in mind. Also, on this channel, auto dubbing is available in 3 new languages, in addition to all the ones I listed here. So Dutch, Polish, and Korean are new. All of my teaching videos on the subject of Vedic astrology are my concepts playlist, so you can find them there. Wherever you see a double asterisk on one of my talks, that means there's a teaching video on that subject if you'd like to learn more. My channel is all about playlists, so that different videos are easy to find. So, like this type of video is in my transits, Gochara transits playlist, but there are others like bhavas, houses, yogas, planetary combinations, and that sort of thing. Also, if you'd like to learn astrology by looking at famous birth charts of famous people, places, and moments in time, I would check out my birth chart archive list 2025 video for a list of all the famous charts I've analyzed on the channel and the videos you can find them in. So some of the newest videos I've posted, in case you've missed any, Gaura Yoga, or the Shining Combination, which I'm actually going to mention in one of the famous charts I cover in this monthly video. Also, Ashwini Nakshatra, Lunar Mansion, New Moon or Amavasya on 21st October 2025. Or I also talked about comets or Dhumaketu, since we've had a few comets in the last month or so. Also, the national birth chart of Turkey. And then if you're new to all this and want to start learning Vedic astrology or want to get more into talks like this, I've listed at the bottom of the slide here what I would consider the basic foundational videos to, again, get you started, in a very solid way. So I would check out those videos if you want to start learning. Okay, so here's a list of all the dates for the month when things are shifting in the sky. Let's just go through them. So November 2nd, Venus entered Libra, its own sign, which is Tula in Sanskrit. Then November 5th, there's a full moon in Aries or Mesha, and this is going to happen in Bharani Nakshatra. November 6th, Sun enters Vishaka Nakshatra, and Mars also goes combust or asta. November 7th, Venus enters Swati Nakshatra. November 9th, Mercury goes retrograde or vakri. November 11th through 13th, Mercury and Mars are in planetary war or graha, and Jupiter goes retrograde. November 14th, Mercury goes combust. November 16th, Sun enters Scorpio or Vrishika, which is a samkranti, Sun transiting signs. And November 17th, Jupiter has an exact aspect on the Sun. November 18th, Venus enters Vrishika Nakshatra. November 19th, Sun enters Anuradha Nakshatra and Mars enters Jyeshtha Nakshatra. 20th of November, there's a new moon in Anuradha and Scorpio, and Mercury re-enters Vishaka Nakshatra since it's going retrograde. November 22nd, Jupiter has an exact aspect on Mercury. November 23rd, Mercury re-enters Libra. Mars has an exact aspect on Rahu, and Rahu enters Shatabisha Nakshatra. November 24th through 25th, Mercury and Venus are going to be in planetary war. November 25th, Mercury leaves combustion. November 26th, Venus enters Scorpio and goes combust. November 27th, Saturn goes progressive. And November 28th, Venus enters Anuradha Nakshatra. So we've got, a lot of combustions going on and wars going on this month. So, there's a lot going on. So let's, start to figure out what all this actually means. All right, so let's just start off with looking at how things are changing in the sky over the course of the next month. So on this slide, we have 2 different charts, one for November 1st, the second for November 30th, so first and last day of the month. And the thing to note is that both of these are oriented so that they're both Aries rising or Mesha Lugna charts. Okay, Mesha Lugna is just a Sanskrit for Aries rising. So if you're not familiar, these are North Indian style charts. So what you want to do to orient you or to get you started on these charts, the top diamond in the middle, that's the rising sign, ascendant, first house, Lugna, all different names for the same thing. And then to get to the other houses, you count inclusively from the first house and then counterclockwise. So that upside down triangle on the upper left of both charts, it has a little 2 in the bottom corner. That's the second house. The 2 is there not because it's a second house. That refers to the second constellation of the zodiac, which is Taurus. The 1 in the first house, little in the bottom corner there, that refers to the first constellation of Aries or Mesha. So again, both of these charts are Aries rising or Mesha Lugna charts. The reason why I do that is because Aries rising or Mesha Lugna charts are considered to be a natural zodiac. So when you read a chart, with that purpose of looking at collective energy, this is the one you would use. Okay, so that you can consider this to be like a org chart for all of humanity or all of the world. Okay, so on the left here, let's see, we've got a few different things going on. Well, I think probably the most notable thing over the course of this month here is that we have Sun in the beginning of the month. We have Sun debilitated in Libra. Okay, Sun is a leadership planet, so it represents like the president or king typically. In contrast, the other leadership planet is Mars. Okay, Mars is rather than being president or king, is more like commander in chief of the army or CEO. So hands-on in the trenches type of leadership. Okay. So Sun is debilitated, but Mars is swa, meaning it's in its own sign. So Mars is very strong. So there can be more of like a very hands-on type of leadership going on. It can also be, they're both fire signs, so there can be issues with anger, irritation, outbursts, that sort of thing. Okay. But Mars is stronger in the beginning of the month. Okay. Towards the end of the month, you can see Sun is moving into Scorpio, where Mars is in the 8th house. So both of the fire signs are going to be basically dominated by this Mars in its own house. Okay. Luckily, Venus is there to take the edge off. Venus is like a diplomatic, social grace type of planet. And Sun is in, the second half of the month, and mostly in the nakshatra or lunar mansion of Anuradha. So lunar mansions, there are about 27 of them. Every night, thus, the moon passes through a different one, and they all have different energies. So after 27 passes of nakshatras, you get a lunar month. So Anuradha is one of the nicer nakshatras because it's victory, but victory by building alliances. Okay, so this should take off some of the edge here of what Mars could potentially be, because Mars on its own, very strong, can be quite, irritated or angry, violent even, that sort of thing, with outbursts and stuff like that. Mars is more of an erratic type of planet than Sun is, even though they're both leadership planets. So the thing is, we're going to see Venus and Sun, dominated by Mars. But the thing is, Mars is going to go combust. So when a planet goes combust, it's so close to the sun, you can't see it in the sky anymore with your eyes. So the outer manifestations of Mars will not be seen. Okay. However, internally, you will get stronger manifestations of Mars. So Mars represents things like, erratic actions, action in general, uh, rebelliousness, physicality, that sort of thing. Men, okay. And so, again, the Mars is going to be combust for a while, a few months. I should check on the dates on that, but it's going to be combust for a while. Okay. The other thing, at the end of the month, Venus is in there, the Scorpio constellation in the 8th house. The 8th house represents deep psychology. So that's the other thing that's important, is that the ruling planet for both of these charts is Mars. Right? And so that's why I'm looking at Mars, especially since Mars is very strong. But Mars is down deep in the 8th house. The 8th house is considered to be a dushtana or negative house, a house of misery, if you want to, translate it, kind of literally. But the eighth house is also deep psychology. So the fact that the ruling planet in both of these charts has gone to the eighth house, it's like a considering of self, reconsidering of self. Okay. And again, Mars is going combust. So this could literally be somebody who kind of goes off for a while and is really contemplating themselves and their ways in life or who they want to be or the actions they want to take. Because again, this is all Mars type stuff. Okay. Mars is also libido. The only reason why I bring that up is because Venus is also there in the eighth house, and eighth house can represent sex actually, and Venus represents love. So Mars is more lust, Venus is more love. But both of these planets, Venus and Mars, are going to be combust by the end of the month. So this could be hidden sexuality, frankly. This could be hidden romance. This could be like a crush, like maybe having a passion for somebody but not revealing it to them, that sort of thing. So yeah, we're kind of in the beginning of the month, Mars is with Mercury. Mercury is more of a thoughtful, logical planet. So it might be, again, contemplation about self, especially the outward manifestation of self, since Mars is not Columbus yet. But by the end, it's, kind of going deeper into like, what are my true, passions here? And that might be literal, or it might be kind of, philosophical, right? But yeah, Mars is going to be strong, all month long, and that also means that the lugna is going to be strong, the rising sign, and that's important because the rising sign represents the whole physicality of somebody, like if this was a person, and also their personality and psychology as well. So mentally and emotionally, there's going to be this deep contemplation and consideration and change. So it's almost like going into a cocoon here. That's why I had a nice big butterfly on the first slide there. Okay, so again, this is collective energy we're talking about here. So let's go to the first chart and look at that a little bit, and then talk about the second chart just to see how the sky pattern shifting and what's going on. So in the beginning of the month, the moon nakshatra is in Bhadrapada. I mean, that's already going to tells you that there's going to be emotional trouble going on here. Because the moon is sitting between two malefic planets. You can see Rahu, the north node of the moon, and then Saturn, is Saturn. So Rahu is ambition, but also obsession, compulsion, especially when it's with a mind planet like moon. So there could be something that's really worrying a person. Then Saturn is there, and Saturn represents obstacles, delays, skepticism, doubt, fear, depression, even. And so Moon, is the emotional mind planet, is sitting between these two natural malefics. And all three of those planets, Saturn, Moon, and Rahu, are all sitting in this nakshatra called Purvabhadrapada, which symbol of that is a funeral pyre. So there's some endings, there's change, mentally, emotionally, and there's ambition here to do this. So it seems like it's almost like something's got to change type of energy. Okay, and the other thing is that Moon is, in its relative position with Saturn, is creating a sati, and it's in both of these charts. Okay, so keep that in mind as well. Sati is a 7.5-year period. So Saturn takes 2.5 years to go through transit through a constellation. So when Saturn comes into the constellation before a natal moon, of the natal moon, and after the natal moon, so when Saturn passes through those three constellations, again, 3 times 2.5, it's 7.5 years. That can indicate a lot of things. A lot of people are scared of sati. It can be, good, bad, both. The main thing, though, is with sati is it indicates usually very a strong long-term support system is lost. Okay, so you can see just with Saturn, Moon, and Rahu, you can almost see like Saturn retrograde. The line under Saturn means it's retrograde, so it's kind of squeezing on Moon here. Okay, and all three of these are again in this funeral pyre energy. So that's a lot of mental, emotional upheaval, destruction, churning, going on. But you can see at the end of the month, Moon has passed both of those planets. And the other thing is those two planets, luckily, are starting to shift away from that funeral pyre energy. Okay, so there might be some area, especially whatever's related to Pisces or Aquarius for you. It's almost like the pressure has been building for a long time, especially the mental emotional pressure. Okay, where you're sort of like, I don't know if I can take this anymore. Um, so anyway, by the end of the month, Saturn is going progressive. So it's almost, you can see it's sandhi. It's in the first degree of Pisces here. It's meaning it's unstable. But now it's moving forward. So it's going to keep going. It's going to move forward through the funeral pyre energy. So we're not completely out of the woods with Saturn, but at least it's moving out of the funeral pyre energy. Okay. So it'll take another, I think it's like 2 months or so for Saturn to really move out of it. But at least it's like going forward instead of like going deeper into, the funeral pyre energy. And then Rahu, by the end of the month, is shifting out of the Purva energy into Shatabisha, which is interesting. Shatabisha literally translates as 100 healers. So sometimes when you have planets in that nakshatra, it can indicate people who are interested in healing, like doctors, nurses, dentists, whoever. Or it can mean somebody has a disease that's difficult to cure or heal or diagnose, meaning that they need 100 healers to deal with them. So since the Rahu is a natural malefic planet in that, and Rahu on its own indicates things that are hidden and unusual, there might be some hidden, unusual type, kind of diseases popping up here. Especially since Mars is aspecting Rahu, and Mars can indicate infections. And so when you have Rahu and Mars together, you can get something like viral infections or, something like that, unusual occurrences of something like that. So at least for a while, probably a good 6 months or so, Rahu is going to be in that energy, which is elusive and abstract and confusing, but not nearly so obviously destructive as being, literally toast in the Purva funeral pyre energy. So at least, it's kind of like things are mounting, the tension's mounting, but then by the end of, not that we're out of the woods, but the tension will start to ease slowly once, especially Saturn and Rahu have shifted, in different directions. So anyway, a lot of emotional trouble, tension, swirling, 'cause especially when you have Moon with Rahu or on the Rahu Ketu axis, that can be like obsessive, compulsive, impulsive behavior, thoughts, feelings, just swirling in the mind. That's not easy to deal with. So the dasha period for the first chart is Jupiter, Mercury, Moon, Mercury. So we're picking up this Moon energy again. The dasha period is a planetary period. So when I list planets for the dasha period, that means that these planets you can think of them as more active or influential during that time. So Jupiter and Mercury are both related to speech, and they're related to education, and they're related to news. Okay, so, we've got, the other thing is Jupiter, luckily, is in its exaltation sign of Moon, a moon-based sign, I should say, of Cancer. So Moon is very strong, and what's nice about that is right now Jupiter's kind of padding, sugarcoating as much as it can this really strong Saturn, destructive Saturn, because Saturn can literally indicate death, and it's like, again, retrograding through this funeral pyre energy. I mean, that's not cool. And Saturn was really moving through that nakshatra. Let's see. Really from last year, last fall, and then it started to move out of there to Gochara, I believe in June. So, last year was, really hardcore for a lot of people, and that's because Saturn is where it has been. But again, Saturn is starting to finally and move away from the area. But this Jupiter, getting back to this Jupiter, it's exalted, and Jupiter is like, the great natural benefic. And I usually kind of think of Jupiter as Santa Claus, like it's jolly and happy and charitable and kind and spiritual and all these sort of things. So Jupiter's aspecting this kind of gnarly Saturn, and Saturn happens to be in a sign of Jupiter. So that means that the Saturn is going to be Jupiter dominated, luckily. Okay. So that should take some of the edge off of the Saturn and whatever it's doing, making its final rounds of this deep, long lasting, change that's occurring here. Okay. Because Saturn's not going to be back in this part of the sky for almost 30 years. It takes the Saturn almost, 29, 30 years to go through the whole zodiac. So this is the final kind of restructuring, resurfacing, release of old structures that need to be done away with to open up way for the new. And again, this also relates to this metamorphosis energy that I referred to, which seems to be the theme for the month. Okay, so the fact that Jupiter is here, at least there's some upliftments, that's, or even spiritualization of these transition, this change and transition that's going on here. And you can see Mercury's down here again in the eighth house, but it's aspect in the second house, and the second house releases speech, and Mercury is also a planet related to speech. So this could be, again, like talking about these changes, sharing these changes. The second house also refers to family and inner circle. So this might be discussing the sort of like personal transformation going on of self. Okay. There are a bunch of yogas in this chart. These yogas are kind of planetary combinations, give meta effects for a chart. So there's a Chandra Mangala yoga here, which relates to property, land and property, especially. There's a mangalik yoga here, which means that there can be trouble with relationships. There's a Hamsa yoga here. That's that really strong, exalted Jupiter in the fourth house. That's a very gives a big spiritual type of energy. There's a Parvata yoga here. Both of these charts have Parvata yoga because Mars, the ruling planet for the whole chart, is very strong. It's in its own house. And that will give a leader of leader energies. Okay. And then we have solar and lunar yogas here, which will give support to both the sun. Well, not the sun. The support, positively supporting the sun, negatively supporting the moon, because you have natural benefics surrounding flanking the sun and natural malefics flanking the moon. Okay. So even though the sun is debilitated here, it's still being supported by these natural benefics that are flanking it. And as of, was it this morning? Yeah. Venus shifted into its own sign of Libra, where sun is, which should very strongly pull up the sun's debilitation. Not fully, but, it'll help a lot, especially because Venus is also a natural benefic. It's the worldly advisor, it's the diplomat, it's the social grace planet. So leadership, may have been struggling here, especially because there's strength, though, because Sun is aspecting Aries where it's exalted, and Mars is Swa. So there's strength at the top here, but also a lot of irritation, fighting, aggressive action, potentially. Okay, so Jupiter's exalted, Sun, Venus, we got that, Mars. Okay, so again, there's an outward, again, especially in the beginning of the month, outward transformation of self. Like this is something, the transformation that's happening in the beginning is something people will be able to see easily. Maybe the way you walk, maybe the way you talk, maybe the way you do things, how you show up. But this is also involving idea. It's like a decision. It's ideas here. And again, at this point, Mars and Mercury are in the nakshatra of Anuradha, which is victory through forming alliances. So this might even be like, asking people support in these changes you want to make. And also success regarding long-term problems. So there can be problems here, because we're focusing on the eighth house, and the eighth house relates to long and deep problems, like whether it's chronic illness or death or bankruptcy and that sort of thing. So, the fact that we have these two planets, Mars and Mercury in Anuradha, is positive. And the Lord of the eighth house again is this Mars and Anuradha. And then we have this exalted Jupiter pulling this up. This might be like also legal issues because we have this really strong Jupiter with a really strong Mars, which when you bring those two together can be, contracts and legal things, right? And also this massive Jupiter, since it's like a very benefic type of energy, it's going to bring optimism to these kind of struggles that have been going on, because there's clearly mental emotional struggles. Like even though Mercury is an Anuradha, it's like the decision, the choice to make things better by forming alliances. You still have this really strong natural malefic Mars on Mercury. I mean, there can be, again, anger and irritation, but again, it's probably contained for the most part because Mars and Mercury are again, in Anuradha, and then we have this massive Jupiter also helping out, bringing some optimism and hope. So the second part of the chart, second half of the month, the second chart, we have Moon Nakshatra and Uttar Bhadrapada. So Uttar Bhadrapada is a nakshatra after Purva Bhadrapada. Uttar Bhadrapada is also related to a funeral pyre, but the back legs of a funeral pyre. And the energy here is related to change and transformation, but there's this energy also embedded within that of transcending and overcoming and bringing order to chaos, or bringing some, even enlightened perspective, you could say, to the changes going on. Okay. So that's generally much more desirable of a nakshatra than Purva Bhadrapada. Okay, so the moon is starting to move out of, make sense of all the chaos that's been going on. Okay, Sha period in the second chart, Saturn, Jupiter, Mars, Venus. So again, Saturn, we're contemplating all this loss and destruction. Saturn's in the 12th house of expenditures and losses. Okay. And then Jupiter and Mars. So we still got the exalted Jupiter aspecting the Swam Mars in the 8th house. So again, that should be bringing, is internal spiritualization, optimization of self. But again, Venus and Mars, which we're talking about here too, are combust. So second part of the month, this is going to be more of an inside job that may not be so evident to others around. Okay, they may not. So yeah. So it may not be so obvious the transformation going on in the second half of the month. So yoga is in the second chart, mangalik. Again, problem with relationships. There's a solar yoga here. Parvata, again, leader of leaders. There's also a bala rishta yoga here. So we have 5 planets in negative houses. So this can indicate like difficulty in childhood or in the beginning of time, certain times or cycles here. So again, it looks like there's some deep, internal contemplation that happens. Then it's first sort of external, then becomes internal. And then it's like this really development of leadership of self here. When you have the sun and Mars like this, luckily Venus is there to take off the edge. Luckily Jupiter is there to take off the edge. So this should be, generally speaking, a positive change of leadership, self-leadership here. Okay, and will bring strength. Okay. Let's see, overcome obstacles, legal, I mentioned. Again, hidden passion, also non-physical relations. So what this means, because Mars, again, literally represents men, and Venus literally represents women, and they're both going to be combos for a while. So this might be like, loving someone from a distance, non-physical relationships, like maybe long distance, or, digital only virtual relationships, or partner is, needs to travel, so you're going to touch physically, that sort of thing. Again, it could also be like hidden relationships that are not, maybe there's a relationship going on, but nobody around you knows about it because it's one in the 8th house of hidden, hidden things. Also, the 8th house can be scandals. So this could be like hidden, relationships related to leadership, actually, if we want to go down that road. But again, if we're talking about everybody, there's here where it's like, also the passion here. This is a passion combination when you get Venus and Mars together, but they're both combust. So this is passion that's not expressed. So yeah, and again, this Mars, which is combust, is aspecting the second house of oral communication, and it's also aspecting the third house of nonverbal communication. So there might be love, passion, lust, all the above, some of the above. That's not being expressed here. It's all contained inside. So, interesting here. All right, so let's see what else we got going on. Okay, so on this chart, I was going to talk about Mercury, Buddha, and Venus, Shukra transits for the month of November. So November 2nd, Venus enters Libra true law. So that's actually pretty nice, because again, it'll pull up that debilitated sun. make it bunga. And also, Venus is the worldly advisor. So, being in its own house should bring better advice, especially because Venus just came out of its debilitation sign of Virgo, where it was also aspected by this like hardcore Saturn. Okay, so it may have been that for the last 4 to 6 weeks, there wasn't a lot of good advice coming through. Now there should be better advice coming through, as well as diplomacy, social grace, that sort of thing. Um, Also, Venus is related to arts and creativity and relationships. Now, I can kind of go either way with relationships, frankly, because Venus will be stronger, but the thing is, Libra is the natural seventh house. So, Venus in the natural seventh house creates what we call a karako. And what that means is the planet representing a person, in this case Venus, which represents spouse, spouse like partner, is in the house of related spouse, spouse like partner, which sounds pretty good. But actually, it's almost like there's too much energy there. So it can actually indicate problems with spouse or spouse like partner. Okay, so we've got that going on. The other thing is that on November 7th, Venus enters Swati nakshatra. So Swati is related, the symbol of that is new grown grass blowing in the wind. So there's this kind of nervous, fragile energy about that. And Venus has just entered that. So this could be like a emerging art, emerging artist, emerging relationship. Okay. That's a bit fragile. Okay. So, um, yeah, the other thing is that this could be because Sun has been debilitated for a while and Sun is, can represent general health. So it might have been, and Venus, the worldly advisor, was in its debilitation sign aspected by Saturn. So it might have been that getting good advice about something medical has been challenging lately. So when Venus enters, again, Libra, um, this should be like getting good advice about some medical issue for those that's a concern for. November 9th, Mercury goes retrograde or vakri. So again, rethink, reconsider, replan, start from scratch, go back to the drawing board. Mercury also represents friends. So this could be like seeing friends you haven't seen in a while, which also kind of matches because Mercury will be retrograde for about 3 weeks through the end of the month. Um, More or less, I think Mercury leaves combustion and retrograde. No, it looks like it's gonna be retrograde for the rest of the month. So, yeah, so that's also, at least in the United States, where I'm sitting right now. That's really we're kind of heading into the holiday season already. We just had Halloween that kind of starts the party, and then we have Thanksgiving at the end of November, and then uh, you know Christmas, New Year's, Hanukkah, December. Some of the big holidays. So yeah, so we're moving into a party mode here. So again, this could be like seeing people, talking to people you haven't uh, in a while. Um, Rethinking business as well. Mercury can be business, Mercury can be education. So kind of rethinking, replanning those, considering those. Then 11th through 13th of November, Mercury and Mars are in planetary war, graha, uccha. So these two planets and what they represent are going to be up against each other. Mercury is the logical, analytical mind, and Mars is the action planet, impulsive planets, that sort of thing. So mind over matter, it could be that kind of thing. Like what do I think? What do I do? That kind of thing. Then November 14th, Mercury goes combust or asta. So, meaning all these external manifestations of Mercury, like talking, like speaking, like planning, like meetings and that sort of thing. Um, they might go quiet for a while, because somebody's going internal to talk to themselves or reconsider their ideas or plans, that sort of thing. This could also mean Mercury going combust. This might be your friend who, like I mentioned. So we're going to have three combust planets this month by the end of the month: Mars, Venus, and Mercury. So this might also mean that holiday plans may not turn out how you might prefer. People might be unavailable or traveling or that sort of thing. So then November 18th, Venus enters Vishaka nakshatra. So that's pretty nice. Venus is strong because it's in its own sign. But Vishaka is like success, but at all costs. So this might be like over romanticizing something or over romanticizing something or being overly diplomatic. really sugarcoating things, that sort of thing, to again create some sort of win. But it might be a little bit of a forced win, or you might really have to turn on the charm, to create the success. Then November 20th, Mercury re-enters Vishaka, so this can be mental and emotional arguments going on here. Again, victory at all costs. So again, there's going to be a little bit. Luckily, these are natural benefic planets, typically Mercury and Venus. But so this won't be a hard push. But it might be like somebody really trying to get you to come to their holiday party or something. It could be like that. And you may not want to go, or you have to figure out, maybe you get multiple invitations, and then you got to figure out where you're going to go on what day, what time, and you figure that all out. So then November 22nd, Jupiter has an exact aspect on Mercury. Again, this should pull up all things Mercury related. So, and bring some wisdom and grace and generosity to these, again, mental, emotional arguments going on here. November 23rd, Mercury re-enters Libra. So this could be cooling off anger and irritation, because Sun will be out of there by then, and Sun and Mars will be Scorpio, but Mercury will be out of that mix, and both of those are fire planets, Sun and Mars, so that should cool off Mercury. And the other thing is that when Mercury's away from those fire planets, it should settle down. So that means thoughts and plans, like rather than being hazard with decision making, or doing out of anger or fear, kind of impulsively, compulsively, like you can kind of cool down, take your time, and really think things through in a positive, planned way. Then the 24th through 25th of November, Mercury was in planetary war with Venus. So friends versus lovers, again, it's a little bit more of a pillow fight. Because again, Mercury just moved from Scorpio with Sun and Mars, two fire planets, and now it's with the Swa, Venus. Again, this isn't too much of a real fight here. Again, it's almost like when Venus and Jupiter are in war, it's more of a pillow fight than anything. It's not easily much to worry about, but there can be a little bit going on here. Then, let's see, November 25th, Mercury leaves combustion. So then all this planning and thinking and reconsidering and things that have been going on with Mercury earlier in the month are starting to manifest outwardly. So this could also be like building business plans, because this is all happening when Mercury leaves combustion. It's with the Swa Venus in Libra, and Libra represents the marketplace, and Mercury represents business. So this might be like coming up with new business plans, or Venus also represents like social grace. This could be like entering a service industry of some time, or becoming a consultant, that sort of thing. Then November 26th, Venus enters Scorpio and Vrishika, or Vrishika in Sanskrit, and goes combos the same day. So it's like, this might be like all of a sudden, like all this like really shiny, luscious Venus energy that's going on most of the month. All of a sudden, it might seem like something kind of loses its shine. Okay. The other thing is that you might find that Venus, because Venus represents social grace. Okay, so I'm trying to remember when was the last time. Some of the recent, like in the last few years, when Venus has gone combust. Okay, usually things have kind of burst out on the scene that were not very kind, not very polite, not very diplomatic. Like there were uh, protests and things like that related to Black Lives Matters for a couple years ago, and then there was some student protests and stuff like that. And that's all fine and good. I mean, people definitely have the right to do that. But the thing is, it got kind of ugly where, people were burning things, destroying things, vandalizing things. It was getting like really kind of off the hook. So that's what I mean. Um, in terms of when Venus goes combust. Let me just remind myself of when Venus is coming back online. So hold on a second. Okay, so yeah, I just added the date. So Venus is going to be combust until 16th of February. So all the holidays going on between the end of November through, what is it, Valentine's Day. So, so I don't, you might want to reschedule, you might not only want to, but you might have to reschedule some of those get-togethers and stuff like that for after February 16th. The other thing is that I actually specifically have a video on Venus and Jupiter combustion because those are the two great benefics. And in Vedic astrology, there's a lot of things you don't necessarily want to, activities you want to start when either of those planets is combust. So you might want to check out that video. Yeah, so it may be kind of rocky, frankly, socially, for what is it, November, January, what, 2.5 months? Because December, January, yeah, like 2.5 months. It's kind of a long time. So just keep that in mind. If people suddenly are like flipping out, and they're usually pretty calm and collected, this might be why. So November 28th, Venus enters Anuradha Nakshatra, which is good. So even though it's combust, at least it's, again, building an alliance here, victory through alliance. So this might be socializing at a distance, getting in touch with emotions, hidden passions, expression, crush, that sort of thing. So, at least it's going through a positive nakshatra for a while, but again, we've got all the way through February 16th to experience the world without an externalized Venus energy. So, so we'll see how that goes. Okay, just actually a couple more things about this Venus combust. So, yeah, this may be linked with this what seems to be an emerging romance situation. Is that it might be like almost feel like somebody's ghosting you or something like that. Because again, Venus suddenly disappears in the sky. You can't see it with your eyes anymore. This could also be like since Venus and Mars are both going to be combust at the end of the month. This could be like passive aggressive behavior. And yeah, also I was just checking out the date for Thanksgiving in the United States, and it's on November 27th. So yeah, Venus is going to be combust through a lot of the holidays, end of November through mid February. So yeah, probably not what most of us would want, but it is what it is. So all right. So on this slide, I've got my first famous chart. This is the chart of Hedy Lamarr, who is both an actress and inventor. So pretty interesting combination. Yeah, and I forgot to change that. Hold on a second. Okay, so yeah, interesting person. And again, actress, inventor almost seems like two different people, but that's not too surprising because look at the top here. We've got Gemini as a rising sign, so that's a dual air sign. So somebody who can hold contrasting thoughts, in their head. Um, yeah, so that's her. So her birth date, it seems like, is November 9th, 1914. And at least from memory, the birth time is 17:30 p.m. So she was born in Vienna, Austria. So I'm just going with that. Again, I haven't seen an actual birth certificate or anything, but yeah, let's just see. It does actually fit her pretty well. So I'm not too worried about it. But yeah, so the Lugna Nakshatra here is Ardra. Ardra is symbolized by a storm cloud. So stormy energy. The other thing is Ardra is related to emotions because the symbol of Ardra is a drop of water, which can be related to sadness, but it can also be related to a storm cloud. Okay, like rain from a storm cloud. So the other thing is that Ardra is related to electricity because of the lightning that happens during these storms. And again, I think it fits for both her actress position and the inventor position. Okay, so she was an actress first in Europe, excuse me, and then she came to the United States. And so again, films at that time, because she was born in 1914, that was all like new electric, energy, art medium, right? So it fits there. And on top of that, she actually has a Rahu aspecting her lugna here. Okay, and Rahu and Ketu can symbolize things like film and movies. Okay, so that fits pretty well. The other thing is that this electricity, I believe, has to do with her invention side, which is pretty impressive because she had no formal education like physics or anything like that. But she was somebody who, she had kind of an obsessive nature about her. We can tell that because she has Mars aspecting Rahu. And Rahu, again, is a very ambitious energy. And Mars is like action and stuff like that. So when you get Mars and Rahu together, you get this like obsession, compulsion, impulsive type energy, okay? And the Mars and Rahu meet up in her ninth house, which is government, but it's also higher education, which she didn't have, but she basically was self-taught, which is, again, even more impressive. So apparently what she invented was a jam-resistant radio guidance system for torpedoes. So, and the reason why I heard or I understood from her bio is that apparently she was married to some guy who was hobnobbing, was fairly rich, and was hobnobbing with high-level military people at that time. And so conversations were held at their house by high level officials about like the problem with torpedoes and stuff like that. And so I don't know how she came up with it, but she did. She and a friend who was a musician, the two of them came up with this technology that they patented. And this technology actually is what developed Bluetooth and Wi-Fi. So even though it seems very distant and odd and eccentric, it actually affects our modern lives today, her invention. So that's pretty impressive. But anyway, so sadness and electricity we get right off the bat from her chart. Then Sun, again, is in Vishaka. This is success at all costs. And Sun, again, is career. So she was successful, but she had prices to pay from this. One of the things that happened with her, she actually was involved with a film. She got involved with, she was always interested in acting, and she did some film, I think a Czechoslovakian film. She was in the Czechoslovakian film industry for a bit when she was young, and she got involved with one film. I think it was called Ecstasy. Especially for that day and time, was fairly risque. I think there's some partial nudity and some, intimate scenes or whatever that were controversial and that kind of caused her a bad reputation. Um, again, did she knowingly do this? Did she not realize she was fairly young, or did she willingly do this? Um, you can see here in the fifth house for her, this is Libra here, which is a marketplace, but the Lord of Libra is Venus, and Venus has gone to the sixth house here. Venus is retrograde, and it's also, it's in Jyesta Nakshatra, so there's some protection here of, again, you've got Mars and Venus together. So this could be, again, relationships, sexual relations, frankly. And Mars is here in its own house of Scorpio. So between these two, Mars is going to dominate this Venus. And I think she's the Venus here. She's the lady here. And she's for her entire life was surrounded by very strong male figures. Okay. But also, like, there were going to be problems with her art and her career because Sun is debilitated in Libra here, and the Lord of Libra has gone, to a negative house here, sixth house. So I think this is also her protecting herself from male admirers and things like that. Apparently, they marketed her as the most beautiful woman in the world. And apparently she was stunning in movies and things like that physically. So, and also she was typecast as a sort of like exotic seductress and things like that. So she became kind of I think a sex symbol as well, but she had to, I think, protect herself from so much, libidinous activity and interest in her and that sort of thing. And actually, I think she had some stalkers and stuff like that. One of them, who was very insistent, was one guy she acted the first husband she married. She was married 6 times. And he turned out, she actually left him. She kind of snuck off or something like that, because I guess he was Not the nicest guy, which isn't surprising here because the seventh house of, spouse, like partner, business partners, and stuff like that. The lord of that is Jupiter. Jupiter's gone to the eighth house of deep, long term problems, and Jupiter's debilitated. Okay, and we have Saturn of delays, obstacles, problems in this Ardra energy aspecting her seventh house. So there's going to be a lot of tumultuous, sad energy, unkind partners involved in, kind of revolutionary type partners. And again, whether it's a film industry or military or whatever. So, again, she had all these, very high level, strong male partners, but again, they weren't the nicest of sorts. So let's just say, and you can see that in her chart here. So the moon nakshatra is in Pusha, that's symbolized by a cow's udder. So there's a lot of nurturing and stabilizing, kind of adoptive type energy. And the thing is, for her, actually, she has moon in Cancer here. So if you saw my one of my latest videos, the Gara Yoga, I was like, oh, she's got moon, she's got a swa moon here. Where's Jupiter? Jupiter's directly across. So Jupiter is exalted in Cancer. So this is a super strong second house. The second house relates to the voice and speech. So she's probably like a honey-tongued type of, speaker. Also great with languages, of which she knew several languages. So again, this is where I think the seductress type energy comes from in terms of her speaking. But also the moon here, this represents the face, and the second house represents like from the, kind of jaw down, the neck. So this is somebody who's going to have a beautiful voice, a beautiful face, very attractive. Okay. And also this Jupiter that's aspecting here and exalted is in Shravana, which is a storyteller. So that was her storytelling through her face and her voice, the acting and stuff like that. And this is one of the, I would say, probably this, I would say the strongest house in her chart. And I think this was, I think she ran these planets and stuff like that. At least she did in her birth dasha. So, but it was a bit of a mixed bag. So, during her heyday, I believe this was fairly active, the second house here. Um, yeah, so then we have the day lord of moon and hurrah lord, our lord of Venus. So these are the two emotional planets. So a lot of emotions here. Um, again, moon very strong on its own. This is the emotional, intuitive mind. And Venus is here retrograde, which brings its strength, but it's dominated by this Mars here, Swan Mars. So again, a lot of libidinous, sexual, femme fatale type energy going on here. I think both in her personal and professional life. Then the Bertasha, Saturn, Venus, Jupiter. So again, we're picking up like right at the top here, this sadness energy, delays and obstacles, and then the second house, and then the sixth house here. So, a lot of positive traits, but a lot of problems as well. So how her chart recreates the current sky pattern, well, you can see there's a lot of similarities. Saturn is from the Gemini in this chart aspects Sagittarius and Pisces, which it does currently in the sky. Ketu and Rahu are on the Leo Aquarius axis, and Rahu's in Shatabisha, which it will be at the end of the month. Mercury and Sun in Libra. Mercury just left. Yeah, Mercury just left Libra, but it was there like last week, and Sun is still there now. Mars and Venus in Scorpio, which will be coming about at the end of the month. Mercury and Mars are combust in this chart. So at the end of this month, well, Mars and Venus combust, and then Jupiter's aspecting Cancer. So there's actually a lot of similarities between her chart and the current sky pattern. Let's go through house by house and learn more about her. So again, Gemini, Mithuna, rising sign. This makes a lot of sense for her, actually. So dual air sign, so contrasting ideas. We have a retrograde Saturn in Ardra. So again, delays, obstacles, and she was. So I was like, she probably had mood issues and things like that. And I think I wrote it at the bottom here is that she was often seen in her persona, like her public persona was different. So again, there was a duality there. But, people who knew her in private said she was very lonely and homesick and shunned crowds and, she was kind of a hermit, which is very different from her seductress actress persona. And then Saturn is aspected by the Swa Mars. And I've mentioned before, when you get Saturn and Mars like this together, you get an engineering type energy. So again, she was naturally, I believe she was an engineer, but she had this face and voice that got her attention. So, and then we have Rahu and Shatabisha aspecting here as well. So this is like an electric engineer, which is essentially what she did with developing this, torpedo radio guidance system or whatever. So at the top, I'm seeing like engineer, electronics, difficulty. I didn't read that in her bio, but I'm guessing she had some like maybe arthritis in her body, neuromuscular pain. Um, and again, maybe some sort of infection early on in childhood, but I didn't see that in her bio. But based on this, I could see that happening. But she's like an idea person. She's an idea generator. Also, film actress, you could see that's sad. And again, she's got this Gauri yoga. The shining yoga will bring her this sort of shining star energy and probably make her quite charitable as well. And then in addition, she has a budhaditya yoga. So this Mercury Sun in the fifth house, that's a intelligence combination, especially related to math and science. So again, even though she was, her day job, was being this like movie star, um, she had this seemingly totally different self, which was a self-taught inventor of military defense. So yay for her. I mean, that's a pretty unusual combination. Again, this Rahu brings unusual, strange type energy, and so this Rahu I've mentioned before. When you see Rahu or Ketu in the Lagna, that can bring somebody that can create somebody like an actress or a model who's sort of like presenting one kind of potential of themselves, but their private self might be completely different. There's like an illusion effect there. Yeah. So, and actually, the illusion is not just her as an actress on film, but the illusion is this like, what is this jam resistance guidance system? So they wanted to prevent, torpedoes from, not hitting their mark, I guess, or so yeah, pretty interesting already as a person and chart. So anyway, the second house I've already been talking about. I'm very strong. As a storyteller known for face and voice that's nurturing. The other thing is that she has a sadhisati, like I mentioned in the first day and last day of this month. So early on in her life, she basically was running sadhisati, especially because she was born into Saturn period. So this is again, she was born in 1914. Right at the end of during the First World War, and then into the Second World War, and then basically she was able to escape, Nazi Europe. Luckily for her. Then the third house lord is a bhavam sun. So this is one action after another, and we have Ketu here in Maga. So this is like an unusual, kind of leadership. She would do unusual things here, and aspected by Saturn. So this is where I think she was sort of tinkering, repeating actions, experimenting with different things. I think this is her, tinkering with technology type stuff as a hobby. The other thing is that the Saturn and Ketu in the third house, I would assume she would have trouble with siblings and neighbors. And apparently she was an only child. So based on this, this Saturn and Ketu, those are both separatist energies. So she may have had siblings that just didn't survive if there were any other siblings. Then the fourth house here, fourth house lord is Mercury. It's aspected by Jupiter. This is like a shaky home here because Mercury, the lord of the fourth house, is in Swati, that new grown grass blowing in the wind. So a fragile home, fragile past, with little kindness. Some kindness, but very little kindness because again, Jupiter is debilitated in this chart. So, but luckily, again, Jupiter is like really, blowing up her second house of voice and assets, face. What she's known for. Then let's see. Mm, yeah, hold on here. Yeah, fourth house. Yeah, hold on. I think my tea is ready. Hold on here. Okay, sorry. I had my tea, but I forgot where I left off. Yeah, I think the fourth house, right? Fourth house Lord is Mercury aspected by Jupiter. So shaky past. Um, not very much, not a lot of compassion there, I would say. The fifth house Lord is a retrograde Venus and Jesta. So again, this is protecting oneself, but again, it looks like there are issues here. Also the fifth house is a natural stage. So, there could have been like, again, the emergence of speaking, but you can see the sun is debilitated here. So leadership was probably not the greatest. And this might have been like directors who were putting her maybe literally in compromising positions for her. And again, some of the things she did early on, like kind of ruined her reputation in Europe. So she kind of got to start fresh in the United States. And then, yeah. This fifth house also, let's see. Yeah, Mercury, because Mercury is her ruling planet. It's in Swati. So I think she probably had some mental health issues. It wouldn't surprise me. Some nervousness, anxiety. Um, and then probably some health issues as well. Also, there looks like I would assume there are problems with children. It was a strange story. I didn't quite understand, and maybe that's because Rahu is aspecting her fifth house as well, so that's going to make things strange and unusual and hidden. Apparently, she had 3 kids, and the first kid she at some point claimed was not biological, and that he had different information or whatever, and thought that she was, and then eventually did a DNA test. And apparently, he was not related to either of the people he thought were his parents. So it was a very strange story. Um, yeah, and yeah, so you can see that in the fifth house here. Um, Also, like, she died from heart disease, and the sun is debilitated in Libra here. And the fifth house also represents the heart. So, and Mercury is the peripheral nerves, sun is central nervous system. She probably had some, again, nervous system disorder, um, maybe infection here. Rahu's aspecting there. It's a little hard because, again, Rahu's going to make everything like strange and unusual in this chart. And she kind of seemed like a strange and unusual person, I mean, she had her public persona, which was quite successful, but even that was a bit devious. It was it was a persona. It wasn't necessarily her personality. So, yeah, and then the sixth house I mentioned, very strong Mars, Venus protecting self from strong male energies or interest, I would say here. Seventh house Lord is Jupiter aspected by Saturn. I mentioned like this is going to be a difficult, unkind relationship and partner. So she very frankly could have been used and abused to physically, sexually as well, based on this chart, unfortunately. Then the eighth house Lord is Saturn, and we have a debilitated Jupiter there. So again, Saturn is going to bring a lot of sadness here, and debilitated Jupiter is going to bring somebody who's more pessimistic than optimistic, I would say. Then the ninth house here. So yeah, I think I'm seeing a lot of potential, you know, physical health, mental, emotional health stuff in this chart. Despite her wild worldwide fame, and the money she made. So, let's see, the 10th, where are we at? The ninth house here. Ninth house Lord is Saturn, aspected by Mars and This is going to be an obsessive studying and also like government machine. So, again, she develops, technology for the government. In the 10th house here, the Lord is Jupiter, aspected by Saturn. So, she's not going to be like the 9 to 5 working type here. There's going to be a lot of delays and obstacles. Also, her reputation not necessarily the best because the lord of that house is debilitated. And then we've got Saturn aspecting in Ardra. So maybe not the best reputation in film. So based on this, I'm guessing her reputation wasn't for being like a stellar actress. It was just she was so beautiful and sexy or, whatever. That was really the thing. But how well she depicted her character and embodied her character. I'm not sure that was really what she was about. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think she's the one to win the Academy Awards. Not this type, Then the 11th house here. 11th house lord is Mars, aspect of my Mercury and Sun. So successful crowd work, I would say. Wait, did I read that? Yeah, Mars. Yeah, these are like emerging leaders and stuff. So this is going to be, success. I think this might say like she'd be better working in film rather than on stage because fifth house here is stage and Sun is debilitated. So, like theater, I don't know if she did any theater work, but I'm not sure she would be super great at it. Um, I think she needed the extra lights and time and all this kind of stuff rather than do things live, with a big audience around her. So then the 12th house here, the Lord is Venus aspecting its own. So there's going to be protection here from losses. That's good. And then Mars as well. So protection from losses overseas. Yeah, so again, only child escaped Nazi Europe, co-invented this jam resistance radio guidance system for torpedoes that directly influences modern day Bluetooth and Wi-Fi. She won beauty contests at a young age, was involved in controversial films, had stalkers, left her husband, typecast again as the exotic seductress, lonely, homesick. She was caught shoplifting. That was also kind of interesting, which you might get from this third house, actually, because K2's there. She's going to do unusual physical actions, and sad. So I don't know if it was a way of getting attention. I think it was more like to see if she could do it. Like it was sort of a game for her. That's what I'm saying. Um, yeah, estranged from her son, who ended up being biologically unrelated to her, and I guess she was estranged from him from the time he was about 12. So what's the story there? I didn't read about it, but it's a strange story, I'm sure. And then she died from heart disease. So interesting person, but again, I think some of the energies again of this current sky pattern played out through her life. Especially right now, with Venus being in its own sign in Libra. That's going to bring a lot of creative energy. So that's kind of why I put her chart first, because her chart mimics the sky pattern more closely now. And then the other charts I've added to the talk, you'll see it evolve. You'll see the charts evolve as the sky pattern evolves. And if you notice like who these people are, like, the next one I'm going to do is a military general. So that's when Sun and Mars are in sign of Mars, where everything starts heating up, and you've got the two leadership planets very strong. So yeah, interesting lady for sure. Hard to not remember her. All right, so Sun and Mars, what are they doing in the sky this month? So November 6th, Sun enters Vishaka. That's the victory at all costs, and Mars is Kamba. So in some ways, this might be good because Mars is a fighting planet. It can be, irritated, mad, angry, violent, even competitive. So all that's going to go undercover. But also, Mars represents courage and action. So things might be, slow down quite a bit. It'll still be energized because the sun is is in the sign of a strong Mars, even though it's not seen. Um, but yeah, so this might be more symbolic leadership rather than actually roll up your sleeves and get things done type leadership. And Mars is going to be combust until March 26th. So what is that? Was it November, December, almost 5 months? That's a really long time. So anyway, be prepared. Now you know. So, at least at the time of this November 6th, Sun is debilitated, but it's Bunga now because it's with its Swa Venus landlord. So this could bring a lot of diplomacy to leadership initially. And creativity, for leadership. And then the Swa combust Mars is with Mercury and then aspected by Jupiter. So this might be related to education, communication, alliances, news. So stuff you can't see, but maybe you could hear or feel. Then 11th through 13th November, Mars and Mercury at war. So again, this might be success because they're going to be in Anurata at that time, if I remember correctly. So there's going to be success in integrating action and words, passion and logic, that sort of thing. And again, Mars is combusts. I think Mercury combusts. It's at that time too, or will be soon. Yeah, it's combust, right? Yeah, it's combust. So, this is all underground, what do I say? What do I do? That sort of thing. November 16th, Sun enters Scorpio Vrishika. Again, this is samkranti. I have a whole video on this, so you can learn how to work with that energy. So this is going to be a very fiery, competitive, probably ADD, attention deficit type of leader, all over the place, very active, because it's with that Swa Mars, which again you can't see. So their mind might be racing because Mercury's there. But maybe externally, at least they can sit still. They might seem like they're still internally, but internally they're whirling, it looks like. Then November 17th, Jupiter has an exact aspect on Sun. That's kind of nice. It's going to bring some grace, ease, charity to Sun-related things. So general health, career, soul, boss, authority, government. Then November 19th, Sun enters Anurata. This is again, building alliances, victory through building alliances. So that should be pretty nice. But at that point, Mars also enters Jesta, which is a protective energy. So there's going to be protection here, an internal protection, because again, this is a protection you can't see, right? So, yeah. And then November 23rd, Mars has an exact aspect on Rahu. And both of them will be Swa. Mars is in its own sign of Scorpio, but Rahu's in its own star in Shatabisha. So this is very strong. I mean, this could be very obsessive, compulsive behavior, an infection, like a viral, exotic viral infection, going on some kind of wild goose chase or outburst here. And again, Mars, you can't see Mars or Rahu, so most of this is going to be internal, something you can't really see. Maybe instead of outburst, I should put like implosion, because again, you won't be able to see this going on here. So yeah, things are going to heat up for sure towards the second half of the month. Okay, so here's our military guy. This is Charles de Gaulle, who was considered to be one of the greatest statesmen that France has ever had. He's often likened to Napoleon, not because of personality, but because of the scope of influence he's had on the country, development of the country and people. So, big guy here. And you can see right at the top, he's got Sun and Scorpio. He doesn't have Mars in Scorpio, but he's got Mars exalted in Capricorn, which is his, ruling planet. This chart, let me just back up a little bit. So this chart is for 22 November 1890, 4 a.m. And he was born in Lille, France. I actually have the Surya Lugna here, okay? So this chart, you can see the ascendant is actually in 29 degrees, 47 minutes of Virgo. So right at the cusp, Virgo, Libra cusp. And if you give it 2 minutes, it flips from Virgo to Libra. So especially, I've seen enough birth charts from this period of time in France, and they don't seem to be very precise. They seem to be written like every 15 minutes. So I think they were approximations. And so with just a 2-minute difference between Virgo and Libra, I was like, you know what? I'd much rather take a sun chart and be sure about it, because you can see Sun is, solidly in Scorpio there. So even though I have his exact birth time, I still did a sun chart for him for that reason. But so he has Sun and Scorpio, and again, Mars is strong, not because it's in its own sign, but it's in its exaltation sign, which is almost the same, I would say. The other thing is this super strong Mars is in the third house of courage, and Mars represents courage. So clearly, as a general, during these world wars, big guy there. And you could see this Mars exalted in the third house. Looks pretty good, but it's with a debilitated Jupiter, which is aspect in Cancer, which it's Jupiter's currently in Cancer. So, and their third house represents neighbors and siblings. And Mars in the third house gives a karako, bhava, nasha Mars, meaning that there's trouble with siblings and that sort of thing. So these are his, neighbor countries, military neighbor countries who are not very kind. Like Nazi Germany, for example. Yeah. So, yeah, a pretty interesting chart. Let's look a little bit more. So he's got a pravraja yoga right at the top there, 4 planets and a positive sign. So that's a life focus of self. And I don't think it literally meant himself. I think it meant his leadership. Yeah. And yeah, because he was involved in so many ways in the development of the country. So his Lagna Nakshatra is Chitra, which is symbolized by a gemstone. And that nakshatra I often associate with architecture. So he was an architect of the country, I would say. The Sun Nakshatra is an Anurata, so victory with alliance, and literally he was with the allied forces, yeah. Then Moon Nakshatra is Uttar Bhadrapada, so again, this is that funeral pyre energy, but bring order to chaos at that point. The Day Lord Venus, so advice, diplomatic. The Hora Lord Sun, leader, advice, diplomat. So, as far and wide as his influence was, most people in France see his time of being a statesman in general to be mostly positive. And he went in and out of retirement. They kept kind of drawing him out because they needed, somebody like him to get the job done, I guess. And yeah, I mean, he went. So he was a French general, and then he became prime minister at one point. Then became president at another point. Rewrote the constitution. Like you can see, like a pretty hardcore guy here. And so that's the kind of energy we're heading towards at the end of the month. Second half of the month here. So moving from again arts like Hedy Lamarr to Charles de Gaulle. So the birth dasha, Saturn, Moon, Venus, Jupiter. So again, he also grew up in Saturn period. Responsibility and ethics, and working hard. Moon and Venus, so emotional. Venus and Jupiter, diplomacy and advice. So government. Also, Saturn can be bureaucrat, bureaucracy. So government, public. Moon is public advisor. Sounds like him, right? So how does his chart recreate the current sky pattern? Well, Jupiter is on Cancer. Mars is on Capricorn and Aries. It was recently. It just moved, actually. Mars just moved, but it was recently, like a week ago. Then Sun, Mercury, Venus, and Scorpio, which they will all be there by the end of the month. So his Surya Lagna is Scorpio, Vrishika, fixed water sign. So, he's fixed in his ways, especially his career and his emotions. Like he's a very solid guy in that respect. Doesn't switch sides, switch tactics or point of view. It's not like he goes from one political party to the next. He's pretty straight here with his dealings. And Sun with a combust Mercury and Anurata, K2 is there, and a retrograde Venus and J. So this is going to be a transformational leader, victory alliance, and implement unusual. There's going to be some unusual energy here because the K2 unusual means protecting loved ones is what I'm saying here. So whatever it took, he mostly through alliances, which is great. Again, I think the Venus there, the Mercury there, and Jupiter's not very strong, but at least that Mars has Jupiter with it. At least there's thought of Jupiter there, even if it's not a strong Jupiter. That's all going to so all these natural benefics with his very strong Mars, and then the Sun there. That's going to temper him. That's going to color his leadership in a positive direction, benefic direction, rather than like a dictator that everybody hates, that kind of thing. So, And he also has a parvata yoga. He had that really strong Mars as a parvata. So he's going to be a leader of leaders, which is what he was. Then the second house lord is a bhavam, debilitated bunga Jupiter. Yeah, there's a lot going on in this chart. And Shravana. So he was also a storyteller in a way, kind of like Hedy Lamarr. But you can see he wasn't really about the arts. I mean, at least there was some finesse with what he did, but it was all about action. So this Jupiter, I haven't quite gotten there, but he would lecture and teach about military tactics and stuff like that. And he would write manuals for even other countries. Like he was a advisor teacher for Poland, when they were fighting the Russians and stuff like that. So again, I don't think he as much as finesse and makes it look as sexy as Hedy Lamarr, but he was also quite prolific in speaking and writing and that sort of thing, teaching. Then the third house here, the Lord is Saturn, which is in Purva Falguni. This could be again like the end of good times, or delays in good times. Jupiter's there, and then we have an exalted karako, bhava, nasha, Mars, and Shravana. So aspected by Ketu. So that's a lot. This could be like explosive, destructive talks and actions with strong militant neighbors. Hello, Nazi Germany, and courage, all of the above. There's a lot going on in this third house. In the fourth house lord is Saturn. So again, this is going to be the end of, the good old times, past homeland, is what I'm saying here. Because again, Saturn is in Purva Falguni, so there's some strength here. But the old happy times of France were delayed, and for quite a while there during those world wars in Europe. Then the fifth house lord is Jupiter, which is debilitated, and the fifth house is related to children. So were there a problem with children? Well, he had 3 kids, but one of them had Down syndrome, and because of that, she died fairly young, I think at the age of 20. But he had a really good relationship with her. But you would, again, potentially see here, and Moon is in, I think it's in, what did we say? Uttar Bhadrapada, so order to chaos. So there's some strength here, but also because Jupiter's compromised, I would imagine that there were problems with children. And again, with him being gone so much, that might have been part of it too. It was just him traveling and being away for so long. He was actually a prisoner of war for almost 3 years, so that alone can, if for whatever reason you just don't see your kids for that long, they develop separately, that could be a problem. Then sixth house lord is Mars, and its aspect its own. So again, very strong military enemies. There you go. Kind of like was it Hedy Lamarr's similar like that? No, she had Mars and Scorpio, but yeah, she had a Swam Mars in her 6th house. So very strong, aggressive men. Either way, one in Hedy Lamarr's chart, she also had the Venus there, so sexually aggressive men, And then here, the 7th house of Venus, the Lord is Venus, aspect its own house, so there's going to be strength here. So this is actually pretty nice. His 7th house here, very different from Hedy Lamarr's. I mean, he's got Jupiter aspecting here, Mercury, Venus, Sun, and Rahu's there. Rahu, though, is in Rohini. So this is going to be like a unusual foreign partners, advisors, including he was married, so she apparently was a very good advisor, probably to him, and very benefic, because all the benefics are aspecting into the 7th house. So this is a very different 7th house than Hedy Lamarr's. He didn't have to sneak off and run away from his spouse like she did, I guess. So then the 8th house here. 8th house lord is Mercury, which is an Anurata. So, he's considering different ways to build successful alliances here. That's the 8th house is deep psychology. The 9th house, the lord is the moon, and it's aspected by debilitated Mars, but also exalted Jupiter. So this is law and fairness, bringing law and fairness to erratic military actions. Erratic, yeah, I mean, government actions, that sort of thing. Yeah, because he was all over the place. I mean, because with him, he was a general, and then the thing is, he ended up running, chairing a provisional government outside of France, like the, what do they call it, the Free Men of France or something like that, Free People of France. It was basically like an ad hoc provisional government until they were able to restore democracy back into the country, once the Nazis left and stuff like that. So, that's all just sort of, unusual, bizarre, ad hoc, actions for government authority. So you see that here in this chart. But again, fair and hopeful, optimistic, regarding home building, rebuilding home. Then let's see, 10th house here, 10th house Lord is Sun. And that's in what? Anurata. So that's good. So those are his, and then he's got Saturn here aspected by Mars. So again, he's like an engineer. Hedy Lamar had Saturn and Mars in her Lugna. He's got Saturn and Mars in his 10th house of 9 to 5 work and reputation. So in the 5th house, and it's in Leo, so it's going to be a high level architect of military bureaucracy, that sort of thing. Yeah. Then the 11th house here, 11th house Lord is Mercury, aspected by Jupiter, Moon, and Ketu. So successful bringing together displaced public groups. Then the 12th house here, 12th house Lord is Venus, aspected by Saturn, advising advising about foreign issues and losses, POW time, prisoner of war time, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, so pretty interesting guy. And again, the reason why I included this chart is that he kind of embodies, or very much embodies, the kind of energies we're going to be experiencing towards the end of the month. So there you go, Charles de Gaulle. Right, so on this slide, talking about the slow movers in the sky, so Jupiter, Guru, Saturn, Shani, and Rahu, and Ketu. So November 11th, Jupiter goes retrograde, or vakri. That's going to bring strength, especially emotional strength, since it's in an emotional sign, water sign like Cancer, where it's exalted. This should bring, again, some hope, optimism, fairness, justice, especially, like I said, Saturn and Rahu are finally moving out of some very tough negative spots, negative energies. So, it's a very strong Jupiter should hopefully smooth some of that over. Then November 17th, Jupiter has an exact aspect on the Sun that's going to lift up leadership. November 22nd is going to have an exact aspect on Mercury, so lift up speech, decision making, business maybe even. November 23rd, Mars has an exact aspect on Rahu, and Rahu enters Shatabisha. So again, this is going to be that obsession, compulsive ADD, maybe unusual infections that are hard to treat or diagnose because of the positions here. And then November 27th, Saturn goes progressive, which is nice because it's going to slowly start to move out of that Purvadapita energy, which is pretty hardcore in terms of loss and destruction. So, once Saturn's finally out of that, I think it's in about 6 or 8 weeks, we're going to start to, actually bring some order to the chaos that it's created in that position. But again, it's it was a necessary thing, a necessary change. It's almost like I think of the Tower card in tarot. Everybody fears the Tower card, and things fall apart. But again, for the most part, it's a necessary and good change. It just at the time doesn't look very good or very happy. So and again, this very strong Jupiter, at least that's holding up, buffering the results of this very virulent Saturn. So that's good. And then finally, the moon here. So I always do separate videos on full moon and new moon. So yeah, it's I'll do my best to get this full moon video out. It's only in a couple days because the full moon and the first of the month are getting closer and closer together for a while. So the next few months, that'll be a little bit tight for me in terms of getting the videos out. So I appreciate your patience on that. But the full moon that's happening in November is going to be in Aries or Mesha and Bharani Nakshatra, which is symbolized by a womb. So it's a neutral sign for the moon. It's a movable fire sign. So there's going to be a lot of fiery energy here for the mind, creating something. And it's also going to be Swa Venus is aspecting here. So this might be, again, some kind of creative energy. It could be literal in terms of, having a baby or something like that. Because Bharani also indicates like energy of like adoption and fostering and generally caring for children, birthing and caring for children. So, and the two, emotional planets, the moon and Venus, are involved with this full moon. So this, and the sun as well, because the sun is exalted in Aries. So this could be emotional leadership. But again, also losses and difficulties related to partners, because Venus is still going to be in that natural seventh house, creating a karako bhava nasha. So again, I'll have a whole video on this, get into it more in detail. And then, I just want to give people a heads up of when the new and full moons are mostly. So the November 20th is the new moon in Scorpio, Vrishika, and Anurata. So that's pretty nice because, again, that's a, victory through alliance, but as well as a neutral sign for the moon, fixed water sign, so a very emotional sign for an emotional planet. The sun is going to be there with a combust Mercury and Anurata and Mars and Jesta. So this is, again, building leadership alliance to protect and maybe, involving military or anger, that sort of thing. Because, again, a very strong Mars and protective energy. And then the sun is there, a lot of fire. So, yeah, things are going to be moving and shaking and some decisions. But luckily, at least Mercury's in Anurata. So hopefully that means, things at least at the time of the new moon. The Mercury and Moon were both going to be in Anurata. So both the mind planets are in this Anurata energy. So using this fire, kind of like Charles de Gaulle, like he had the Venus and the Jupiter, you know, uh, bringing benefic energy to his leadership planets, Sun and Mars. So this is sort of like that in a different variation. Okay, so then here's the last famous chart. This is a chart of Clara Barton. You may or may not have heard of her. She was a teacher slash nurse during the American Civil War, and she ended up creating the American chapter of the International Red Cross. So, yeah, so let's look at her chart. It's pretty interesting. And again, there's a lot of similarities with the current sky pattern. So, her chart, as you see at the top, is oriented to Pisces. And right now we have Saturn in Pisces, as she does. And we don't have Jupiter in Pisces, but we have Jupiter in Cancer aspecting Pisces. So Jupiter's aspecting this house, its own house. And you can see Saturn and Jupiter are in the same degree, which, again, Jupiter isn't in Pisces, but it's in almost the same degree as Saturn aspecting from Cancer. So we basically have this going on in the sky right now. So the other thing to note about these, again, different charts, like Heidi Lamar chart, that was a Mercury rising. And then the Charles de Gaulle chart, that was a Scorpio rising. And now this one is a Pisces rising. So, you can have these different energies going on in these different houses that each of it has. Or again, for different rising signs, you might see these sort of energies coming out of these people. You know what I mean? So, yeah, so it's pretty interesting that way. Anyway, let's go through her chart. So she was born December 25th, so Christmas baby here, 1821, 11:52 a.m., according to a biography, North Oxford, Massachusetts, United States. Her Lagna Nakshatra Uttar Bhadrapada. So again, bringing order to chaos or transcending destruction, you could say. Her Sun Nakshatra is in Mula. Mula is a destructive energy. It's a gandanta point, so a very unstable point. And Mula is associated with the deity or goddess Nriti, which is a form of Kali, the goddess of death and destruction. So unless there are benefics in Mula, it's generally not seen as a very, happy, positive, uplifting type of energy. Let's put it that way. So, Yeah, and then the sun represents, again, government, presidents. So again, if we're talking about the Red Cross here, and this sun and mula, and this and the moon, I might as well mention that because they're close to each other. Moon is in purvashada. Purvashada is about sorting through things. Okay, and the sun, this is like public sorting through lack or destruction of government or authority, that sort of thing. So basically, like what the Red Cross does is they go into different situations like natural disasters or man-made disasters and help people sort through when governments or wherever governments are unable to reach or have more resources to deal with. So they kind of pick up the slack for where governments are not able to help, as fast or as far as potentially the Red Cross, and so you can see that in her chart. And this whole sun moon energy is in her 10th house of work, 9 to 5 work, but also reputation. So she's, again, nurturing the public or sorting through public resources to create an ad hoc kind of authority to help out in, again, untoward situations such as the Civil War, such as she also worked abroad in different countries, including Europe. So during, so yeah, so she had a lot of experience. Hold on just one second. Sorry about that. My lights went out. We just changed our time today in the United States, and some of my timers, needed to be updated because I was sitting, all of a sudden I was sitting in the dark, like trying to do the voice for this talk today. So, where were we? Dun, dun, dun. Yeah, so that's what her reputation was. So the Day Lord here is Mars, so action, leader, but again, hands-on leadership. Roll your sleeves up, get in the trench, literally get in the trenches. I mean, she was a Civil War nurse. I mean, that's pretty hardcore. And the Hora Lord is Moon. So again, emotional mind, intuitive mind, public. So CEO of the public, you could say. The birth dasha here, Venus, Mercury, Jupiter, Mars. So again, the two advisory planets, Mercury and Jupiter, the two communication planets, and Mars, again, action, rolling up your sleeves. So how does her chart recreate the current sky pattern? Well, Ketu and Rahu on the Leo Aquarius axis again. Mars is on Scorpio and Aquarius this time. Jupiter is on all the water signs as it currently is. And Jupiter and Saturn on the same degree on Pisces. So a lot of similarities. So her lugna here, Pisces or Mina, dual water sign. Very emotional. She has a Swa Sandhi Jupiter there. So a little bit fragile here, unstable. And this is her ruling planet. The other thing I've mentioned this before. I've never seen it, but I think I've just noticed enough of these charts where I I typically find when somebody has Jupiter and Pisces, they're usually Christian. And I don't know, like I know the two fish swimming in opposite directions. That's a glyph for Pisces, but I know it's also used for, I believe, Jesus, right? So, um, she was a devout Christian, actually. So it's right there. So I was like, here's another example. So anyway, if you find that to be true, let me know. Um, and then she has Saturn, both Jupiter and Saturn in Revati, which is about traveling, like overseas. It's also about hospitality. So again, like nurturing people who are wandering, traveling, lost, kind of thing. And again, Pisces is the natural 12th house of international trade and business, losses and expenditures. So all of that together. Um, bringing order to chaos, the super strong Jupiter, charity. This is a Hamsa yoga, that's a pancha, maha, purusha yoga, strength yoga, power yoga. Um, and also this really strong Jupiter is going to make her a teacher and writer, which she was. And the Saturn and Jupiter, Saturn brings a lot of vata energy. So now I'm talking about Ayurveda, traditional Indian medicine. Brings a lot of vata energy, which is like air and space, and Jupiter represents ether. So usually when I see Saturn and Jupiter together, I usually find somebody who's kind of like shy, timid, but also sensitive. So even though she was very strong, there was that part of her as well. Yeah, so that's her. The other thing is the Saturn and Jupiter. I didn't mention that. Saturn and Jupiter, since they're in the same degree here, they're in planetary war. So this could be like, how do you materialize in a tangible way your spirituality? You know, how do you live in the real world your spiritual ideals? So, the second house here, the Lord is Mars, which has gone to the sixth house, and it's aspected by Ketu, which is in Maga. So, this is going to be a fairly, I would say, unusual leader, speech, trouble with inner circle, acute issues with assets, foreign support and languages, ancestors. So it's like, let's say, yeah, again, I don't think she did do some speaking, but I don't think that was really her wheelhouse. Um, she's more of a behind the scenes, like structural type of person. But she would speak to people. I mean, because she was gathering all these medical supplies and stuff like that. That's how she kind of really translated her um, work experience to founding the American chapter of the Red Cross. So she'd be talking to strangers about how to help in odd circumstances or untoward situations. Then the third house here, the third lord is a sandhi Venus um, in Danishta. So this is going to be like unusual precarious rhythms with neighborhoods, and siblings, that sort of thing. And we've got Saturn and Mercury in there as well. So she actually, so this is like protecting. Mercury's in Jesta, so protecting, siblings, neighbors, and Saturn is structure. So she would actually write manuals, instructive manuals, to teach other profession. Well, I guess I don't think they distinguished professionals at that time, but I guess they're sort of professionals at that time of best practices. Like I guess that's what we would talk about now. She would write manuals to help other people, like learn from her experience and other people's. Then the fourth house lord is Mercury, aspected by Sun and the new moon. So this is like sorting through ideas on how to support the public, or how to support home, land, that sort of thing. Fifth house here, fifth lord um, is Moon, and it's aspected by an exalted Jupiter and Venus. So again, very charitable, practical advisor and teacher. I mean, the fifth house is advising and teaching, and she's got the two advisory planets aspecting here, and she's got again the Jupiter exalted here. I mean, that's a huge kind of like her fifth house is sort of like uh, the way I was looking at the second house for Hedy Lamarr, with that Swan Mars and Swan Moon with an exalted Jupiter aspect. And I was like, kind of like, wow, yeah, it's really strong. Then the sixth house here, the Lord is Sun, and there's Ketu and Mars. And Mars is in Purva Falguni, Ketu's in Maga. So since Sun is in Mula and we have Ketu and Mars here, I mean, Mars and Ketu together bring an explosive energy. This is when things like hit the fan, essentially, not only for groups but the government as well. When the government is like beyond its own capacity to help, with disasters that happen, that's when these guys step in. At least in the United States, I don't know how their reputation is around the world, but whenever there's some sort of disaster around the world, they're the first ones to pop up on the screen where they're asking for donations and stuff like that. So I think most people know them pretty well. Um, Yeah, so this could also be disruption of mail. See, we've got Mars in the sixth house again, which is funny because all three charts had Mars in the sixth house. So we had Mars and Scorpio in the sixth house with Hedy Lamarr. Then we had Mars in Aries, right? Mars and Aries in the sixth house for Charles de Gaulle. Now we have Mars with K2 here. So I would say Clara Barton is going to have the most problems. So hers isn't sexual in nature like Hedy Lamar's, because Hedy Lamarr had Swa Mars with Venus, so that's sexual. This is like disruptive male. So she came up in a time when women didn't do hardly anything. And she was a self-taught nurse in the Civil War. And then she also founded the American Red Cross, which I think she had to let go of at some point. Don't quote me on that, but I think so. She also was like I think she was in the patent office or something like that. And so she would get into these positions and do really well. And then some guy, male, would come in and basically demote her to clerk or something like that, like just even though she had built the whole thing up. So they would take these projects that she just built up and, successful with, and then somebody would just step in and say, "Oh, sorry, you're a woman." So, anyway, yeah, very strange. I guess at the time that was, the way things happened, but it's so she had a lot of disruptive males to do. Then the seventh house lord is Mercury, aspected by Jupiter and Saturn. So again, this is organizing tangible details with partners. This is like, Virgo is like the medicine cabinet. So this is like getting charitable donations of tangible goods to create like a national or international medicine cabinet, essentially. Yeah. Then the eighth house lord is Venus, which is in Danishta Sandhi. So again, building, creating a business rhythm, through all these tumultuous times and situations. Then the ninth house lord is Mars. It's aspect its own house and aspects also Jupiter and Mercury's there. So authority and trouble, you know, um, and but charitable protection and law. And again, I think when this house was active for her was when she was a patent clerk for the government for a while. Then the tenth house lord is Jupiter. We have that sun and moon, and also we have an aspect by Ketu. So unusual public authority planting seeds for makeshift leadership. I don't know if they're involved with long-term assistance, but I think they're more of like a helicopter organization where it's like they're the first ones to drop supplies, in the area to at least get things going, Um, but I don't know if they're involved with long-term, uh, resurrection of places and communities that have been, disrupted. Then the 11th house here, 11th house lord is Saturn. Venus is there, so unstable groups and income, you know, uh, but then advice even, it looks like. Then the 12th house here, 12th house lord is Saturn, aspected by Mars and Rahu and Shatabisha. Or Rahu's there and Shatabisha. Obsessive actions to help, unusual difficult, overseas lands and stuff like this. Um, I noticed in her biography on several times in her life, she was advised medically to step away from her work because she either had physical or mental breakdowns from all the stress, and because she was so obsessive about helping. So again, as I mentioned, just for us in this month, there's going to be this kind of obsessive energy going on with Mars aspecting Rahu. So just keep that in mind. It's like slow your roll and just make sure you're taking care of yourself this month. So yeah, again, another very interesting person, self-taught nurse in the Civil War, started collecting medical supplies for soldiers, and then ended up founding the American chapter of the Red Cross. They call her Florence Nightingale of the United States, or the Angel of the Battlefield. She also, another thing she did was she ran what's called the Office of Missing Soldiers. So apparently, through all these letters of people inquiring about soldiers who were involved with the war were left unanswered. And so she, I guess, offered or volunteered or started a whole office where these letters would be addressed so that people could find their loved ones and I think also their remains or something like that. So she did all that. And again, she kept getting into these situations where she would build up these programs and then some guy would step in and just take it over, demote her, or kick her, which is very strange. But anyway, that was, I think, her experience frequently enough, So anyway, another interesting person, another interesting chart, and again, hopefully another example of how the current sky pattern may play itself out this month. All right, so as always, thanks so much for stopping by, listening to one of my talks. Again, all of my teaching videos or my concepts playlist, they can be found there. If you want more famous charts, I have a whole video titled Birth Chart Archive List 2025, where I list all the videos I've analyzed on the channel, the videos you can find them in. Because the videos, like this was a monthly video, but you would never know there were 3 famous charts in here. So I've been trying to do more one-off charts, but I like doing these monthly videos like this. There's no way you can, like, oh, I've got 3 famous charts. So anyway, any which way you want to learn astrology, hopefully the channel has something for you. I do offer individual birth chart readings, and again, I have that course coming up in January 2026. The deadline's November 14th if you'd like to apply. So if you want an application, email me at heartlightastro@yahoo.com for either personal readings or courses. I do have another YouTube channel on natural medicine where I talk about Ayurveda, traditional Indian medicine, as well as yoga, so other Vedic arts, as well as homeopathy and naturopathic medicine, so other paradigms of medicine. The name of that channel is Nature Source Care, so that's out there too for you. So as always, thanks so much for stopping by, listening, and supporting my work in the channel in all the different ways that you guys do that. Liking, subscribing, sharing, chit-chatting with me in the comments, people sending donations. It's all really great and lovely and appreciated. So thank you for all of that. So as always, I hope you found this talk helpful, useful, and interesting to you as you learn to navigate the energy cycles of your own life. All right, so until the next one, take good care. Namaste.